Thank you, everybody, for attending. I appreciate the opportunity to share the next hour with you. We are promising to have a lively conversation, which is always comical because Matt, Diana, Dennis, and myself typically huddle, somewhere along the week and have a conversation of, well, what do you want to talk about? Like, gosh, I don't know. We haven't had a lot of changes. And then within the last 72 hours, it seems like there's just been a barrage of information that's come towards us. So we appreciate that. Diana is going to kick it off and just do some quick HR updates, which is going to be on Family First, Social Security. We have a special guest today, David from Paylocity, because we thought it would be a nice opportunity to kind of get the Social Security executive order deferral options from a payroll company's perspective to see what they've been experiencing as well. And then Matt will be sharing with us a litany of information. I will let you know that we don't have a lot of slides on him, so we can showcase him. And the reason is because I think yesterday at this time, Matt was on a beach sunning himself and just drove in, I think last night, if I remember correctly.
That is correct. So I'm super fresh. Yeah.
And as the conversation goes, certainly send emails, info@artwork for questions. I've got that open and populated. Certainly the chat box is going to be up and running and populated. So any means that you feel comfortable submitting a question to us, certainly feel free to do so. And then probably just my last course is to make sure I read our disclosure. For all of you compliance nuts out there like ourselves. So just for quick disclosure, Arkwood Financial LLC, Arkwood Benefits Consulting Inc., and Arkwood HR LLC, as you guys know us as Arkwood. We are all independent companies of which we do not offer legal or tax advice. Our goal is to provide information to you for assisting in making the decisions at your company with your leadership teams. But we will leave the legal and the tax work up to those professionals, which is why we such enjoy having the relationship with Lohman as well as with Dennis Hall. All right. So Matt, welcome back.
Thank you.
You look tan.
Yeah. I will add that I was put towards the back of the agenda. I think it was quote because what I am going to talk about is going to make people's brains hurt. What the heck was the first half of this, right? I mean, no offense there, but man, that stuff is painful thinking about. So
you know what?
Yeah.
For 100% full disclosure, Matt, you are correct. I was trying to figure out where the emotional level of everybody would have been after listening to what we're about to tell them. And I didn't want to have that before or after Diane and David. So you are correct. I don't know if it was a short straw or a long straw. However, welcome back, and we do like to tease you because it does seem that you're out of town often. Although actually I do digress, because one of the times you were out of town, that's when you were doing a bike ride down the circumference, I think, of the United States or Canada or something like that. But
something along those lines.
You do relax and you're actually on the beach as well.
But South America to North America, or I don't know, something like that. It was something along those lines. So
let's transition into the next section, just because I know that we do have some updates that we want to go through for the PPP-FA. That's a mouthful.
Yes, it is. That's part of it. I will say, in general, banks are still kind of reluctant to take applications. And I will tell you, banks are all over the board. And so PPP borrowers will probably be receiving a variety of notices from their banks as to when they'll start taking applications, how they're going to interpret certain things, which we'll talk about in a minute. And I'm getting these from my clients who we're helping prepare their applications, and they're just getting communications constantly, and they're vastly different bank by bank. So what I'm about to say is you have to take a little bit with a grain of salt, because there's the federal guidance, but then there's actually how the banks are interpreting certain things. Does that make sense,
Right.
Pete?
It does, because I too am getting those emails. And they're like, any day now, be prepared. We've created a 5-step program, and step 1 is gather information, and step 2 is be prepared to answer these questions. And step 3 is determine if you're short form or long form. And, they are definitely communicating with us, but clearly they're not ready either.
And I think some banks are clearly waiting for Congress to act, because if you guys remember in one of our conversations, I don't know, 3 or 4 weeks ago, when you and I boldly predicted that the CARES Act 4 or 5 dot whatever
Yeah,
was
that
going
was
to be
supposed to be
passed.
inked like a month ago.
That was supposed to be inked and we were going to look like superstars, and now we just look like schmucks.
Clairvoyant superstars, I mind you.
Right, good point. Yeah. But like if the forgiveness, the automatic forgiveness feature of loans under $150,000 is going to take care of something like 84 or 87% of all PPP loans out there. So think about if you take that kind of volume off of the table, it's significant. So I think some banks are still holding out hope that there's going to be some action, but there is no action right now. At least I hear there's some discussion, but I don't think there's anything, at least from my sources, anything concrete that we can hang our hat on. Enough for me to recommend to you to make a projection as to when this is going to be signed. So
I've learned my lesson with that.
Yeah, exactly. So let's talk about what some things to consider. Again, your bank may or may not be taking anything yet, but there is certainly some information out there. And that is, let's talk about the first one, which is the forgiveness form. There's actually 2 different SBA approved forgiveness forms. There's the easy form and the long form. And the long form came out first, and then the easy form came out. And by and large, the best way to go is the easy form if you qualify. And what it is, the easy form, it's really self-explanatory. It's easy to complete. It has about 5 or 6 lines asking for some financial information like your payroll, your rent, and some of those things. And you don't have to get down into a long, detailed FTE calculation and listing out all of your employees and that type of thing. So if you can qualify for the easy form, do it. So that's the first place you're going to go. So you alluded to, you've seen some of these banks sending out, do the calculation or do the analysis if you qualify for the easy form. There's really 2 criteria that you need to worry about. One is, and you meet one or the other. You don't need to meet both of them. And the first thing is, if you could not operate between February 15th and the end of your covered period at your normal operating levels, due to compliance with HHS guidance issued between March 1st and the end of 2020, then you can qualify to use the easy form. So great example here in Arizona, the gyms, I think everywhere, the gyms, movie theaters, restaurants that had indoor seating, they were shut down. And so if you were in one of those situations, you qualify for the easy form. The other one, which if you did not have that situation, the other criteria that you could meet is you didn't reduce the number of employees or the average hours paid between January 1st of 20 and the end of your covered period. And so you have to do a little calculation and Paylocity reports. I've used Paylocity reports. We use Paylocity, so little plug for Paylocity. They've done a very good job. And you can basically take that information off of the reports and do your calculations. And if you meet those criteria, use the easy form. So that's the first and foremost. Do you have any questions on the easy form? Okay. So go there first.
Nothing that has come through. I don't see anything in the chat. Let me check the emails real quick, actually. I tell you, it takes a village. I've got Lisa in the background.
Thanks for the shameless plug there, Matt.
You are very welcome.
What about the 25% salary reduction?
Help me out again there.
So there on the easy form, I thought that if you had reduced salaries by 25%, you weren't allowed to use the easy form.
I believe, I need to go back. That might be one of the safe harbors. I need to go back and check that. In fact, I can pull it up while we're sitting here. I have the form because I paraphrased off of there, but it's if you did not reduce your number of employees or average hours paid. There was something in the PPP-FA with the 25%, but I'll get clarification on that for you.
So I can here. Are you looking at the application?
I can pull it up right here.
I'm going to switch screens. Is this what you're looking at? So you either.
So that's, I don't think that's the easy form. I think you're on, oh,
Yep.
there's, oh, that's a new.
Checklist for using the SBA form 3508EZ. It's on the Treasury's website. And here, I'll put a link in the chat.
I think you have to, Pete, I think you have to, one of the points is you cannot reduce annual salary or hourly wages. Oh, by more than 25%. Sorry.
Yeah.
So I just put what I'm looking at right here. I just put into the chat. So anybody on the call can certainly pull up this PDF. But it does give us the definitions and the checklist for using the EZ form.
Yes. That's interesting.
If I were to not reduce annual salary or hourly wages of any employee by more than 25% during the covered period, or the alternative payroll covered period is defined below, compared to the period between January 1, 2020 and March 31 of 2020.
You are correct. That's check. Yeah, that's number 3 actually on the face of the EZ form. So that is correct.
Yep.
So yeah, more than 25% would not be eligible for the EZ form.
Correct.
So definitely go check everything, just what Pete brought up, as well as all those are right on the face of the EZ form. It's on page 2 of the EZ form. It basically, you have to attest to each one of those things that Pete is bringing up right there. And so basically go through that. If you don't qualify for that, then you have to go to the long form. And the long form requires you to, obviously, it's longer in that it requires a lot more data, and you have to list out your employees and the FTEs. It's kind of a, again, it's a lot more complex. But what I have found is in all of these loan forgiveness applications, the FTE is where people are going to get tripped up on. And so I will also say that I have looked at many payroll reports that list FTEs, and there are errors on them. And so don't take them verbatim. And I'll give you an example. One of our clients has people that are employees that are listed as commission-based, but they were still paying them, but they list them as like a 0.1 or a 0.01 FTE, when really they're a full FTE. It's just that how they're paid is differently. So their FTE report was showing dramatically fewer FTEs than they really had. And so we had to go back and make adjustments to that. And that's just, and it's not the payroll company's fault. That's how the company put that employee in there. So it's not again, I don't want to blame the payroll companies and Paylocity. It wasn't you. So that, I'll say that.
Yeah. That's pretty common too.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
No, but also on the FTE though, you also have a buy if you terminate somebody for cause. So then I guess, Diana, what are the requirements? You just have to just make sure you have the reporting or the documentation of the termination for cause, because this, you're having a conversation with your bank, right? I mean, this is with your banker that hopefully you've got a relationship, and so you can have that conversation so that they know that you're off by one. With a 10-person employee, that's 10% of the forgiveness.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's having you have to have the documentation and make sure that you're keeping it. If it's either a termination for cause or you offered the job back to somebody and they refused, then that can also count towards that that calculation and that forgiveness of the safe harbor. So.
And that's a real challenge for especially some of these restaurant and chains and let's say in the service industry, where the unemployment benefit was greater than the wages that they were making. And so there were people that were leaving or refusing to basically work because they were getting more on unemployment that they were employed. So I agree with you, Diana. It's getting documentation of that you've offered and tried to hire these people. So.
Great. Yep. And now the third bullet.
Yeah.
Recent
so
interim final rule.
Yeah. But real quick before I leave that, so definitely check the FTE safe harbors on the long form. There's a long calculation. The first one is identical in the easy form. I think I like that because the easy form came out afterwards. So if if you can fall under the safe harbor on the long form for FTE reduction, just use the easy form because you'll qualify anyways. But it's really the second one, and it uses your FTE count at certain target dates throughout the pandemic. I won't bore you with all the details because it's a long calculation, but just know if you can get that safe harbor, FTE safe harbor number 2, that is a much, much better way to go than to try and go do a long calculation. And it'll save you from any kind of a reduction in forgiveness due to FTE. So just look at safe harbor number 2.
Okay.
Now your favorite subject. So
Well, I don't know. I'm not going to classify it as my favorite subject. However, sir, I turn the stage to you.
So this one again, kind of came out of the blue in the middle of the night. It seemed like, and at first it's like, okay, well, I guess that could be okay. And then I started having clients present me with their real data. I'm like, oh, this is a real problem. So let's say that there's the business A obtained a PPP loan, and as we all remember, PPP loans can be used for payroll as well as rent and utilities. Now, let's say that business A is renting space from a related party, and it could even be the owner of business A, or it could be a related party or a relative of business A. Now, let's call it building B. So building B charges business A rent. On the surface, I'm like, okay, that they were allowing that. In the very beginning, they were allowing 100% the rent to be included in the forgiveness application at 100%. Well, what the interim final rule that came out on August 24th said was the business A can only include in their rent calculation on the forgiveness app what building B paid in mortgage interest if they have a mortgage on that particular building. So building B has a mortgage and they pay principal and interest payments, and now building B owner can only pass through the interest that was paid on a monthly basis over to business A to include on their application. So right away, you now have less rent expense than what you thought you were going to have on your loan forgiveness application, because that payment is basically taking your rent payment is paying for principal and interest, and now you only have interest. And it depends on where building B owner is on their loan amortization schedule. If they're very late into that amortization schedule, then there's a lot less interest than if they were early on in that.
Right.
Are you with me so far?
I am. So
Okay.
I'll repeat it back just because that's what I do. I learned that from Brandon. Okay, so Pete owns Arkwood. Pete owns, I'll say, SunWest Real Estate. I'm trying to come up with 2 different names. So because Arkwood is paying rent to SunWest Real Estate, which I also own, I now can only deduct the interest portion of my rent payment that was going from Arkwood to SunWest Real Estate.
That is correct. And I'm not going to use it. I'm going to change the term instead of deduct. I mean, can change it to that's it. You can only claim that on your loan forgiveness application. Correct.
Okay.
So,
and if I own multiple companies, so let's say I have multiple companies that are paying rent and multiple PPP loans, and I'm prorating all the interest for each one of those PPP loans if there's multiple companies involved to the same landlord.
You have to allocate it somehow to those businesses, correct?
Okay. And what is the aggregation rule for ownership? So when you say a related entity, is that defined like 414 is related, and for retirement, sorry for jargon, is that related like a retirement plan where common ownership is say 80%? Is that considered one or related, or?
You know, they, I haven't gone that deep into it. I think it's 100%, although, well, 100% seems like a pretty large threshold. I don't think it was that clear. And I think they were really intending for it to be like 100%, because that's a lot of these people do this, or if the partnership that owns the business also owns the building. So it might be, yeah. So I think that's what they're intending. But let me, before we leave that point of kind of that interest, if you as a building owner don't have a mortgage on that particular building, then your rent, you're claiming your rent goes away completely. Make sense?
Okay.
Because
So if SunWest Real Estate did not have a mortgage, just owned it outright, Arcwood cannot take any of that rent payment towards their forgiveness application.
correct.
Because of the related entity. This is only for related entities between operating entity and real estate entity.
Correct.
Okay.
Now, let me throw another little snafu at you. And this one, I don't think they thought about. Maybe they did. I just don't know. But in the original CARES Act,
there's a lot that they did not think through in advance. So
that's right. Exactly. Yeah. So in the original CARES Act, the SBA was given authority to make SBA loan payments to the lending institutions, right? They're back, SBA back, on behalf of the borrower. And so I have at least more than one client that has an SBA loan on their building, and the SBA went ahead and made those mortgage payments, okay, on their building, but on their business, they were wanting to take that rent into their loan forgiveness application. And now, because those are true payments, not deferral of payments, interest is not accruing on that because those payments are like a normal monthly mortgage payment. Now they do not have any rent to claim on their business because the SBA has made the payment on their behalf.
For them, because there's not a deferral.
Correct. If it's a deferral, a mortgage company might defer, but if it's just added on to the end, it's like, okay, you have a 30-year mortgage and you're at year 25 and they're going to defer 6 months, you know, basically they're just going to add 6 months onto the end of your 30-year mortgage. You know what I mean? Then me personally, and again, it's not in the guidance, but me personally say, hey, there's interest still accruing on that loan that you're responsible for. I would put that in that loan application.
Okay.
Or loan forgiveness application.
But as a follow-up, we'll try to define best we can from their rules what defines a related entity as far as multiple ownership.
Yep, we will do that. That's an action item. So
cool.
The last one, and I just bring this up is because this I saw I saw people borrowers getting noticed on this. If you remember the PPP-FA, so that's the PPP Flexibility Act of June 5th of this year, which was really big. That was the one that changed the covered period to from 8 weeks to a potential of 24 weeks. It went from it went to 60-40 split now on payroll and other related expenses. So it was pretty big what they did. But they could only do it for loans made after June 5th because you couldn't go back because those loan documents were already signed by all the borrowers and the banks had already had those loan docs out. Well, the bank, when they did the PPP-FA, there was specific language in there that said it's up to the bank to decide if they're going to apply these new rules back to those old loans. And what I saw right now, actually I got one sent over to me today, was a bank officially notified the borrower that we are going to accept those terms under the PPP-FA, even though your loan was made prior to June 5th. So
have you heard of ones that are saying no, that we're only going to do it for the loans that originated after June 5th?
I haven't heard of anyone saying no.
But it's a possibility. So it's something that we should have. Yeah, so we should be checking with our lenders to see what their interpretation is if we've not already received something from them.
Yeah, exactly. Have a discussion with your bank. If you haven't been notified, I would reach out to your lender and say, hey, are you going to allow me to apply the PPP-FA provisions to my loan, yes or no?
Yeah.
I saw we had a question come in. Do you have that up there? I don't know.
Again, it takes a village sometimes. We have a chat. Yes, another chat came through. Can you reallocate your rent difference to another area like payroll if you use your PPP money before and stay under the % cap? can you reallocate your rent difference?
So
To
good
another
question.
area.
So I think what this would probably be getting at is if you're under the 24-week covered period, then you could go to a situation where you can use 100% of your payroll to apply for your loan forgiveness and not even have to worry about rent. But it's really those 8 week. It's going to be really hard in that 8 week unless you really ramped up your payroll in that 8 week period. But by having that 24-week period, that does give you some alternative of capturing that. But beware that in these calculations, that means you're going to have to maintain a certain payroll level for a longer period of time in order to get complete forgiveness. Meaning now you have to keep your payroll going all the way out, at certain levels for 24 weeks versus that shorter period of 8 weeks.
Okay.
So yes, you can. You can't have more than 40% of non-payroll, but you can have 100% of your loan payroll and payroll related. So benefits, payroll taxes. Yep.
Cool.
That's all
Thank
I
you, sir.
had. Yeah.